We want to thank you for joining us today and for your interest in supporting and advancing economic growth throughout the state. After a successful inaugural round, we're very excited to kick off this second year of the One Stop. This series of webinars is designed to help you understand the One Stop, both in terms of the technical aspects, as well as how your projects and economic development goals fit into the process. These webinars have been designed as well for anyone that is interested in learning about this process and how to access these state resources offered through the One Stop. So if you're a municipal official, stakeholder, practitioner, or practitioner that has a project or an idea for a project that may result in updated buildings, new units of housing, new jobs, safer roads, then you're in the right place. As noted, these webinars will be recorded and posted on our website. Hello, my name is Juan Vega, and I'm an Assistant Secretary for Communities and Programs here at the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. And I'm joined by Pat Shannon, who is the Community One Stop Coordinator. The purpose of today's webinar is to provide a comprehensive overview of the FY23 One Stop. We'll begin with some background and a general explanation of the One Stop, followed by the review of last year and an explanation of improvements to this year's One Stop, an overview of the One Stop programs and how they fit into the development continuum, and finally, a review of the One Stop application itself. We invite you to submit your questions through the Q&A function here in Zoom. On your screen, questions will be aggregated and responses will be posted in an FAQ document on the website. And if we have some time, we'll be able to answer a few. Let's start with some background on the One Stop. The concept of the One Stop was developed by the Baker-Polito administration starting in 2019. In direct response to the feedback that we received that year during the regional listening sessions that led to the state's economic development plan, Partnerships for Growth. Lieutenant Governor Polito and Secretary Keneally heard from communities, large and small, about their frustrations with not knowing about and the challenges in accessing state funding resources to help them advance their goals for economic growth. They also expressed how hard it was to track state programs offered by different agencies on different timelines that never seemed to align well with the community's own plans. That feedback led to an internal review and an exploration of ways to improve access to the various programs and to streamline our grant processes. It resulted in the creation of this Community One Stop for Growth, a single application portal and collaborative review process of grant programs, streamlining the experience for the applicant and better coordinating economic development programs and staff on engagement and grant making. The One Stop reorients the state from just being a passive reviewer of funding requests to an active partner in economic development strategy, priorities, and investment. The FY23 One Stop is the same streamlined process that was unveiled last year. But what we've done is we've now been able to add 12, we now have a total of 12 community and economic development grant programs offered through EOHED, the Department of Housing and Community Development, and the Massachusetts Development Finance Agency. Similar to last year, there are 4 main phases to the process. There's the expression of interest, the full application, the collaborative review, and then the final funding decisions. First, the expression of interest, abbreviated as EOI, is an optional but highly encouraged step for applicants to pitch their project ideas and get feedback from program officers before committing to a full application. We next go to the actual full application, which is where you actually make your request for funding. It is a streamlined application form that allows applicants to submit comprehensive project proposals for that funding consideration. Applicants complete certain sections of an application based on where their project falls within the development life cycle on a scale that we call the development continuum. And rather than applying to specific programs, this allows projects to be reviewed by multiple programs that might be a fit to the project's funding needs. We call the process a collaborative review. Staff from all 3 agencies, as well as some other partner state agencies, work together to review all applications, making sure that applications are reviewed by all the appropriate programs and that the agencies are aligned in their funding recommendations. Throughout both the EOI and full application process, EOHED and its partner agencies will make targeted referrals to other state programs that may be able to help fund a particular project, especially if the project is not likely to be funded by the one-stop. In terms of key benefits, the one-stop process presents several key benefits, both for the applicants as well as for us as state officials. We see the one-stop as a change in the grant-making process that allows state grant makers to partner with the applicants, giving deeper targeted guidance and partnerships throughout the process. The one-stop process allows applicants to receive key feedback through the EOI before completing a full application, which allows the state to holistically and directly engage with you, the applicants, before undertaking that application for funding. It also offers benefits to the applicants in terms of time saving and getting the most consideration for a project from the most programs. We know all organizations have limited staff resources, and this process provides greater access and saves applicants time on research and application composition to the different agencies and programs. This is enhanced even more through the direct referral process, which happens both through the expression of interest and the full application process and during our collaborative reviews. Finally, the partnership between the state and the applicants trying to advance economic projects is a key benefit to the one-stop process. The EOI and the full application give a better view of the applicant's priorities and allows the state to see beyond just a singular grant application. All around, the one-stop enhances the economic development process in the state. Here we demonstrate the last round, the FY22 round, and how the resources were distributed. All of the benefits that we talked about proved to be true in this inaugural round of the one-stop. We got a great response. We received 360 applications from 260 different organizations, asking for over $303 million in funding requests. Unfortunately, we weren't able to fund every project as presented. However, between the programs integrated in the one-stop last year, we were able to make awards to 196 distinct projects totaling $88.7 million in community and economic development support. And on this map, we want to particularly point out to see the participation as it was distributed across the Commonwealth. The 360 applications received represented 177 different municipalities, and the funds that were awarded to 122 communities, touching every corner of the state. We would also note that about a third of the awards were granted to projects that were located in the Gateway City, while another third was provided to projects in communities that were designated as rural and/or small town. And about 45% of our awards went to projects that were in cities in a housing choice community. Furthermore, we were able to see the vast array of projects happening in communities, and that gives us insight to support the work that's happening across the state. Next, we'll want to talk a little bit about what's new in FY23. And a lot of you participated in a survey that we conducted during the last round. And based on a lot of that feedback and what we heard from many of you, we made changes and improvements to the process. First, due to the overall success of the one-stop process, we're excited to announce that the 3 additional mass development grant programs were added this year. Those are the Collaborative Workspace Program, Commonwealth Places, and Real Estate Services Technical Assistance. These programmatic offerings are now embedded into the one-stop, allowing applicants the opportunity to gain access to these additional resources. Following the close of the FY22 round, the survey was sent to all of you, and overall the feedback was positive. When asked to rate the overall experience on a scale of 0 to 10, respondents gave the one-stop a median score of 8. Nevertheless, we also received valuable feedback that allowed the one-stop team to understand how we could improve the process. The largest change that we made was to the development continuum itself, with the removal of pre-development and permitting as a standalone category. What we found was that there was ambiguity between this category and other sections, which caused some confusion amongst applicants. And so to solve this, applicants can now still request funding for pre-development and permitting activities, but they'll be able to do so directly within the corresponding categories, being site preparation, buildings, and the infrastructure sections of the application. Applicants that are designated as rural and small town and or housing choice communities will again have access to grants that are only available to these communities. However, the questions specific to either of those are now built in directly to the continuum categories for which these resources are available. We ask you to please review the NOFA and the individual program guidelines for the details about any funding limits and the required additional questions that in order to be considered by each of these sources. The expression of interest was adjusted this year to begin a month earlier, providing the applicants more time to work with us and submit their EOIs to receive feedback much sooner before beginning their full application. The EOI form itself was improved with less but more focused questions. Finally, we took a hard look at the full application to determine how to further improve the applicant experience. And so the core questions that were consolidated, the initial part of the full application were consolidated from 4 sections to 2. And we removed a lot of the questions that were not widely used by the reviewers. And it was also important to reduce a lot of redundant questions that you pointed out to us. All of these changes will result in a much more streamlined experience for the applicant. Here, we just want to demonstrate the list of the 12 programs. As I mentioned before, we now have 12 programs being offered through EOHD, DHCD, and Mass Development. The Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development will continue to offer the MassWorks Infrastructure Program and Urban Agenda. DHCD's programs will include Community Planning, Rural and Small Town Development Fund, Housing Choice, and the Mass Downtown Initiative. At Mass Development, we will again have brownfields, site readiness, and underutilized properties, which was a new program last year, along with the community planning grants. But we're adding collaborative workspaces, Commonwealth places, and real estate services. Please visit the One Stop website. There are links to each of these programs that will bring you to their web pages as well as their specific guidelines. We would just note that the 43D program, which was listed as an individual program last year, since it wasn't a grant program, it is now, you will still be able to indicate your interest in 43D, but it just isn't listed anymore as a grant program for this purpose. Next, we want to highlight a particular, a new part of all this, which many of you are familiar with, and I know that many of you are participating in Zoom meetings and webinars regarding the MBTA communities regulations. And so, as you may know, starting in 2022, 2 of the one-stop programs, specifically MassWorks and the Housing Choice Community Grants, are linked to this new multifamily zoning requirement for MBTA communities. It was enacted as part of the Economic Development Bill in January of 2021, and the new Section 3A of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, known as the Zoning Act, requires that an MBTA community shall have at least 1 zoning district of reasonable size in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right and meets other criteria set forth in the statute. In total, there are 175 Massachusetts communities or municipalities that are named as MBTA communities and are subject to these new requirements. Any of these communities that does not comply with Section 3A will not be eligible for funding from the Housing Choice Grants or MassWorks. Please note that this requirement, as well as the eligibility for these program funds, only apply to the municipalities and other public entities. These new regulations will not impact or change the eligibility for any non-public entities that would be applying to the one-stop. DHCD is in the process of collecting public comment and we'll be doing so through March 31st on the draft guidelines for the regulations. To remain eligible, however, for 2022, MBTA communities must hold a briefing on the draft guidelines with City Council, Town Council, or Select Board, and need to submit the MBTA community information form by 5 p.m. on May 2nd. For more information and access to the form, please visit the website on the screen, mass.gov/MBTA communities. Again, I just want to note that this is a requirement for municipal applicants and public entities that are intending to apply to the One Stop. I'd now like to pass this to my colleague, Pat Shannon.
Thanks, Juan. My name is Pat Shannon. I am the Community One Stop Coordinator at EOHED. Throughout this presentation, you've heard reference to the development continuum. The development continuum is a critical component of the One Stop. It represents the life cycle of a major community development project from the initial community visioning to final construction. The development continuum is broken up into two broad groups. The first is categories related to preparing for growth, which are grants to support activities and initial steps by community-based actors to attract and guide private investment in a community. Preparing for growth includes community capacity building, planning and zoning, and site preparation. The second group is categories related to catalyzing specific projects, which includes grants to support the implementation of construction activities to leverage private investment leading to new commercial, industrial, and residential development, as well as other improvements that further the community vision. Catalyzing specific projects includes the buildings and infrastructure development continuum categories. Here on the slide, you can see the funding activities associated with each development continuum category. Please note that the One Stop supports several new types of projects in this round, including business improvement, district implementation, placemaking efforts, zoning to comply with the new MBTA communities section of Chapter 40A, which Juan just discussed, the creation of municipal surplus property disposition plans, and finally, collaborative workspace feasibility studies and fit-out projects. As previously discussed, the pre-development and permitting category is no longer a standalone category on the development continuum. As you can see on this chart, the funding activities in the site preparation, buildings, and infrastructure categories are now broken into two sections, pre-development and implementation. With the exception of the new collaborative workspace feasibility studies option, the pre-development funding activities shown here in these three categories were all included within the pre-development and permitting category in the last round, but have now been redistributed into categories that better represent the projects being proposed. All types of public entities are welcome and encouraged to submit an application through the One Stop. Municipalities and other municipal entities, such as redevelopment and housing authorities, will have access to all grants administered through the One Stop process. Non-municipal public entities are also eligible to apply to the One Stop. However, any non-municipal applicant is encouraged to open a discussion with their municipal leadership to ensure coordination and local support. Non-public entities will only be considered for funding under those programs that allow for financial assistance to private organizations. Nonprofit and community development corporations are eligible for funding through the community capacity building, site preparation, and buildings categories. For-profit entities are only eligible to apply through the buildings category. All applications should include a letter of support from the municipal chief executive officer, or if not available, a letter from the applicant explaining why the municipal letter was not forthcoming. Here you can see where each program falls within the development continuum. In the full application, applicants will see links to the guidelines for the programs associated with the section of the application that they are completing. Please take time to review these guidelines prior to completing the application so that you're familiar with each program and understand the eligibility requirements and permissible funding activities. Links to these programs and guidelines are also available on our website right now. We'll now take a look at each development continuum category in detail. First, we'll discuss community capacity building. This category includes technical assistance and implementation grants focused on a target geographic area, such as a district or neighborhood, or a target population. There's a preference for projects that demonstrate a clear vision and a leadership group that is effective and stable. For projects with a target population, there's a preference for those with involvement of or impact on Black and Latino populations. Projects in this category may include technical assistance for improving a downtown or commercial center, early stage strategy development, strategy implementation by an existing cross-sector consortium or coalition, business improvement district implementation, and placemaking efforts. The planning and zoning category includes planning grants focused on early stage projects that require a guiding plan, study, or assessment of project needs prior to any construction or site preparation. The intent is for applicants to produce a planning document with these funds. Some examples include comprehensive master plans, urban renewal plans, municipal surplus property disposition plans, and plans to update zoning to comply with the multifamily zoning requirement for MBTA communities. Next, the site preparation category includes planning and implementation grants focused on projects working to progress a key site toward development. Projects in this category may not necessarily have a final developer or end use identified. However, projects must have a site identified. The activities supported by this category are split into two sections: site pre-development and implementation. Site pre-development activities include site due diligence, site master planning, market studies, civil engineering, pre-permitting and permitting, and brownfield site assessments. Implementation projects may include demolition, site acquisition and related tasks, construction of site-related upgrades, and brownfield remediation. Please note that only public organizations are eligible for brownfield site assessment and remediation funding through the One Stop. Any non-public entities that are interested in pursuing financing for brownfields related projects should contact Mass Development directly. The buildings category includes pre-development and implementation grants to support vertical construction. Funding in this category is intended for projects that are essential to the occupancy of a blighted or underutilized property, as well as those that support the creation of new co-working space. Funding in this category is limited to projects with a strong public purpose and benefit. Like the site preparation category, the activities supported by this category are split into two sections: building pre-development and implementation. Building pre-development activities include studies of building condition, development feasibility, code compliance, and collaborative workspace feasibility, as well as support for architectural and engineering plans. Implementation grants include activities to improve a structure, including construction related to code compliance, accessibility and HVAC improvements, building stabilization and shell repair, and interior demolition and remediation. Implementation grants may also include the purchase of equipment or fit out of new co-working space. And finally, the infrastructure category provides funding for improvements to public infrastructure that leverages and supports private investment in a community. Investments are focused on projects that require this infrastructure to allow for new growth or address road safety issues. Again, the activities supported by this section are split into infrastructure pre-development and implementation. The infrastructure pre-development grants are intended for the design and engineering work required to prepare for major capital infrastructure projects. A private developer does not necessarily need to be identified for pre-development projects, but the goal is that this work will eventually lead to private investment. Implementation grants include the construction of roadways and streetscapes, water and sewer infrastructure, public utility improvements, and bridge or culvert construction. These projects generally should have a private developer identified and leverage private investment. An exception to this are small town road improvement projects, often referred to as STRAP, which are meant to address public safety concerns on roads in small towns. I will now hand it back to Juan to discuss the one-stop process.
Great, thank you, Pat. So here we just want to kind of come back to outline and provide kind of this visual of the entire one-stop process. And you know, we currently, as we've mentioned, the expression of interest phase is optional, but it's highly recommended. It is That's happening now, and once you submit that EOI, it gets reviewed by a committee of several of the organizations involved, and will result in you getting a written feedback report, as well as potentially getting referred to other programs depending on what you describe. And we start with the expression of interest. The main component, as we've mentioned several times, is the full application. That is where you will actually be requesting funds for your project, and that's organized by the core questions, and then the continuum specific questions as aligned on the bottom, depending on where you are applying or where you're seeking funds from. Once we get all the full applications, those are reviewed, and then through the collaborative review process, there's also an opportunity there for referrals, and then we get to the award decisions. We do want to highlight that there are those two opportunities for projects to be referred to programs in any other state agency, and that'll be determined by the committee that's reviewing it. And this is an important piece of the process that we'll get into a little bit more shortly. In terms of the timeline, we want to, again, all this information is posted on the One Stop website, but the One Stop officially opened December 15th with the launch of the expression of interest. It's open and available now on the IGX system. The expression of interest period is open until March 18th. The full application is also open now. We opened that on January 21st. This is at this time, it's important to note that any applicant can create and begin to work on their full application. However, we note that applications can only be formally submitted during the submission period between May 2nd and June 3rd. The deadline for submission of all full applications will be 11:59 p.m. on Friday, June 3rd. And then following the submission deadline, we begin the collaborative review process immediately and continue through the summer. And we anticipate announcing grant awards and beginning announcing announcement events in the fall, similar to last year. So the expression of interest, we wanted to highlight a little bit of what happened last year, and which is the beginning or the first step in our review, in our one-stop process. And as previously noted, the EOI is optional but highly encouraged. It's a form that allows applicants to pitch their project ideas before starting their full application. Once it's submitted, the staff at all the partner organizations or partner state agencies review the submission and provide the guidance and insight to strengthen your applications. Applicants may also be referred to other available programs that are not fully integrated into the one-stop. And all applicants are certainly encouraged to submit their EOIs early in the process to allow the maximum time for getting that feedback and being able to work on your full application. Each organization may submit one EOI form for the FY23 round. The EOI period is open now through March 18th, as we've mentioned. And the EOI form, you could submit up to 2 projects generally. However, for any EOI form that's submitted by February 4th, this would be able to include up to 5 projects. So after February 4th, the application will only accept 2 project ideas for that feedback. In the last round, we received 267 EOIs, and proposing, as you know, some of them propose 1 project, some of them propose 5. We received a total of 675 individual project proposals or ideas across 178 communities. And although participation in the EOI has no actual impact on how the full applications are judged, we would note that 82% of all the successful applications in the last round were made to organizations that had participated in this EOI process. We also, from this process, referred 190 of the projects to programs in other state agencies. We believe that this is a unique and key element to applicant success and getting the direct feedback to the projects and we highly encourage all applicants to submit an EOI. In the next slide, is at this point is essentially a partial list, since this represents the list of some of the organizations that we were able to make direct referrals to, and this list continues to grow. Again, this is also a critical part of our process, because not all projects, when they're pitched, for example, to a MassWorks or to site readiness, may not necessarily be a fit at the moment for the programs that are in the one-stop. But what we commit to do is to coordinate with other state agencies, and particularly through the Community Compact Connector, and other HED agencies and other state agencies, to help applicants find other sources of funding or become aware of other sources of funding that they may not have known about. And this slide is that partial list of projects that were referred during the last round. And the referrals can occur at any time in the process, but are most common during the EOI review and the full application review. I'll turn it back to Pat.
All right, great. Thanks, Juan. So now we will dive into the full application. The bulk of the application is made up of the project core information, which includes the general information about the applicant, the project site, general information about the applicant, the project, and project site, and then the development continuum category questions, which are detailed questions catered to the programs that will be reviewing your application. After the project core and development continuum category questions are the housing choice general questions, certification of application, and supporting attachments. For each project, applicants will fill out the core information sections and then will be asked to indicate the development continuum category that they would like to seek funding from. Most, if not all, projects will fit into a single development continuum category. Based off of the response to this question, they will then complete the application section related to the development continuum category that best fits their project. Applicants may submit multiple projects for consideration, but must submit one application per project. While there's no limit to the number of applications that an organization can submit, it is recommended that applicants prioritize their requests to avoid multiple applications competing against each other within the same development continuum sections. The core questions in the full application are mandatory questions that all applicants must answer for each project in order to apply for funding. The core questions are divided into two sections. The first, section 1, application information and background, asks for basic information about the applicant. This section of the application is identical to section 1 of the expression of interest and will automatically populate if the applicant has submitted an EOI. In section 2, applicants will provide general project information, such as the project name, description, leadership, and ability to execute the project timeline, and anticipated outcomes. This is where applicants will indicate the development continuum category in which they would like to apply. Those applying to the site preparation, buildings, or infrastructure categories must complete additional site information questions, which include identification of the specific site, ownership, and zoning. Public entities will have the option to indicate their interest in pursuing 43D designation here as well. Sections 3 through 7 in the application zero in on the specific categories of the development continuum. Each continuum category has its own unique set of questions beyond those outlined in the mandatory core. Section 3 focuses on community capacity building. Applicants provide details about the project for which capacity building funding is requested, including a detailed scope of work, description of the community coalition, target population, and budget. Section 4 contains the planning and zoning specific questions. Here, applicants will provide detail about the proposed planning project, its outcomes, leadership, and implementation. Section 5 contains the questions related to site preparation. Applicants are asked to provide a detailed scope of work, site details, historic environmental reports, and budget. Additional questions are required for brownfields related applications. Section 6 is the building section. Applicants will detail the specific project for which funding is requested, including the project scope, public purpose, and details about the property, planned use, and budget. Section 7 is the final development continuum specific section. Applicants will provide details about the specific public infrastructure project, such as scope of work, budget, design and permitting status, and information about the private development being leveraged, if applicable. There are 3 final sections in the one-stop application. Section 8 contains the housing choice general questions. In this section contains supplemental questions required for consideration by the Housing Choice Community Grant Program. This section will only be available to communities with housing choice designation that are applying within either the planning and zoning or infrastructure sections of the application, and only if their project budget is within the program's $250,000 funding limit. Section 9 is the certification of application submission authority. This must be completed by the organization's chief executive officer or an authorized official of the municipality or organization. Finally, Section 10 gives applicants the opportunity to include additional attachments beyond those that are required throughout the application. Once the full application deadline passes, the collaborative review process begins. All applications are reviewed by program staff to determine which of the one-stop programs are best suited to achieve the applicant's objectives. This review will include an initial screening based off of statutory and regulatory eligibility requirements, as well as program guidelines. All applications will then be evaluated based on the following core review criteria: whether the project has an achievable scope, the ability of the applicant to execute the project, and the strength of its leadership team, the project having an achievable timeline and a reasonable budget, the outcomes and impact of the project, and progress to date. Again, during this review, projects may be referred to programs outside the one-stop that may be a better fit for the project's needs. After the collaborative review is finished, final funding decisions will be made. Applicants will receive 1 decision letter per project, sent either by the program funding the project, or if not funded, the program that most closely aligned with the project's needs. Like last year, we expect decision letters to be sent in the fall, followed by award announcement events. Program officers will begin contracting with grantees after awards are made public. I'll now hand it back to Juan to wrap up the presentation.
Good, thank you, Pat. Let's see. So again, thank you for participating in this webinar and for giving us the opportunity to outline for you the one-stop process. This is webinar 1. At this time, we'd like to move over to answer some what we find to be frequently asked questions, and we also thank you. We see a lot of questions coming in through the Q&A, and we'll be able to cover a few of those as well. First, the question we get a lot is, if I didn't submit an expression of interest, am I still able to submit a full application? And so the answer is yes. The expression of interest is an optional step. It is an opportunity for you to pitch your idea and try to get some feedback and some guidance to help you fill out the full application. The reality is, if you didn't submit an EOI, that does not impact your ability to submit a full application. I would add that even if you do submit an EOI and let's say propose a couple, 2 projects, the feedback you get indicates that perhaps it's not going to be as competitive. You're not required to submit full applications for those projects. You could submit a full application for a completely different project. So it's while they are interrelated, it isn't, the EOI does not preclude, whether you participate in the EOI or not, does not preclude you from submitting as many full applications as you feel you're going to be able to do. The next question is, if I do submit an expression of interest, will that be enough to be considered for funding? The answer is no. The expression of interest is a very short form. It is designed deliberately in order to provide any applicant, a large city, small town, small nonprofits, etc. Anybody. You don't need to have a grant making team to participate. The EOI is specifically designed with that purpose, to give you a chance to just describe your idea and we would take that and give you some guidance on how to proceed. However, the EOI is not where you request the actual funding, only a full application. A full application would need to be submitted in order to make a formal request for funding. The other question we understand is going to be on a lot of on the mind of many applicants is, if I have a pre-development project, where do I submit this year, since we don't have that category? And I think, as Pat outlined in the sections in the continuum categories, we're inviting pre-development only projects to be submitted within the categories that they correspond. So in most cases, that'll be in either site prep, in preparation, in the building section, or in the infrastructure section. And in all those cases, they will accept and review applications that may be pre-development only, or projects that include pre-development and the construction. And so again, we advise you to review the NOFA and review the guidelines carefully for each of the programs that you're interested in, to understand how those things will be evaluated during this process. Let's see, we do want to remind folks that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website. And then we have a few questions that we wanted to pull out from the list in the Q&A. And I'll remind you, any questions that we don't cover here will be aggregated and provided in an FAQ document, which will also be posted on the website. So we have a question here that says, for regional applications, is a letter of support required from each municipality included in the application? I would say generally, the answer would be no. The letter that we are requiring to be submitted with the application is a letter that relates to the lead applicant. So each full application will need to have the lead applicant, which is the person requesting the funding. It could be on behalf, and in many cases it'll be on behalf of a coalition or on behalf of other communities. And we do ask you to identify those partners in the application. However, the letter that we're looking for is from the main applicant, indicating, and essentially these aren't letters that are necessarily endorsing the project, as much as we're looking for a recognition and acknowledgement from the municipal CEO of the project that's being proposed in their community. Another question we have is, if a municipality and a nonprofit from the same town are applying, are you likely to fund only one of the two within that community? I think I would point everyone to the One Stop website to see we have posted a list of all the grants that were awarded in the last round. And you will see that there are, in some communities, there were multiple applications funded in that town. Really, the focus here is going to be on the categories that you're applying for, and then the competitiveness of your project. And so there won't be a straight, and I would say generally, there won't be a straight, like only one application or one grant per community situation. There will be many cases where we'll do multiple communities. We may have the municipality might be able to get a MassWorks. There's a for-profit that is able to get a buildings grant. There's a group of nonprofits that can get an urban agenda grant. I think we outline in the NOFA, we say, carefully review the guidelines for each program to understand the competitiveness. And so we want to be able to ensure that that you're putting forth applications that are going to be rated high in order to be recommended for funding. And there are cases where we do expect that communities will talk amongst themselves and take the opportunity to apply jointly when appropriate. Another question we have is, should we avoid submitting more than one project in any of the 5 areas of the continuum? For example, we're considering 2 projects that both fall under planning and zoning. So again, this is a place where you want to be mindful of reviewing the guidelines for each program. The planning and zoning is one example where there is consideration that only one grant would be awarded to each community under that category. Some of the other programs do not have that limit. And so it would be important to really review the guidelines for each individual program to understand where they may fall in the continuum and where it's likely to be most competitive. But generally speaking, you're able to submit as many. There is no limit to the number of full applications that can be submitted from any one applicant or from any one community. And we just tell you to be mindful again. Each of your applications is essentially competing against all of the other applications, including the other ones from the same town. And again, we have funded projects from the same community in a similar, let's say, MassWorks, for example, where both projects were reviewed and considered very highly rated and competitive. So we ask you to be mindful of that. And then there's a question here: what sections of the full application pertain to collaborative workspaces? Pat, I'll hand it to you if you want to take a shot at that one. It says it appears to be sections 1, 2, and 6. Could you confirm the collaborative workspaces?
So yes, that's correct. So if you are applying for a collaborative workspace project, you would complete sections 1 and 2, which are the core application sections. And then when you're completing section 2, you would want to indicate that your project is a buildings project, which will then open section 6, which is the building section, which you will complete. And that will constitute your full application.
Great, thank you very much, Pat. So we're just looking to see, let's see.
So there's one other question, just kind of a general question. Will this be recorded and sent? Yep. We are recording this, and we will be uploading a recording of the presentation to our website, and I believe we'll be uploading a PDF version of this deck as well.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we have another question here, and Pat, I'll look to you for some help to remind me. So this is a question about the climate exposure and vulnerability report, the RMAT tool that we are requiring in the application. However, remind me, Pat, this is now going to be a requirement in the infrastructure section.
Yep. That's correct. Yeah, only applicants applying the infrastructure section will be required to complete the vulnerability report, which we call the RMAT tool. We will be including some instructions on how to complete the report, as well as how to upload it to your application in our 3rd webinar, our technology webinar, which we will be posting directly to the website next week.
Yeah, great. And so the answer to this question is that it's not a requirement in the site preparation section.
Correct.
Let's see. Great, we have another question here. So this is the Community Empowerment and Reinvestment Grant Program is not listed. If it continues into FY23, would that program fall under the one-stop as well? And so, as noted, the Community Empowerment Program is subject to appropriation. We'll see, it is being proposed to be refunded in FY23. It'll need to go through the legislative budget process. However, the timing of that particular grant program does not align well. We would have liked to have included it in the one-stop, but again, the timing, we will not have the ability to commit to another round until the budget, the state budget is finalized this summer. And at that point, we will then we'll issue a separate RFP for that. Let's see, we have See, is broadband included in public infrastructure? So unfortunately, at this time, it is not a particular part of the public infrastructure. Public infrastructure is primarily being supported by the MassWorks program, and the and the guidelines for that are essentially improvements to publicly owned infrastructure, and in that, roads, etc. And as the guidelines show, the focus of that is really investing in public infrastructure improvements that will leverage private investment in those communities. And there are other resources within HED and some of our sub-agencies that are focused on broadband. But generally speaking, the infrastructure section is regarding roads, water, sewer, and other types of infrastructure like that. Let's see. So let me read this one. So can a proposed water project through the nonprofit water district be included as part of a town's EOI, or does that EOI have to be separate from the town? Final completed projects is a presumed partnership with an overall project, water district road. Okay. So the suggestion on the EOI, and again, being mindful that the EOI is an opportunity for you to pitch what you were thinking and give us a chance to give you feedback on whether which way to go, whether it's something that you should do in partnership with the municipality or not. So this is a question primarily that you should utilize the EOI for. As far as whether the town submits it or the water district, each of those are two distinct entities, and technically both would be able to submit their own EOIs. Our advice is, if the town has another 5 different projects that they would like to pitch in their EOI, then the water district should submit their own EOI with their project to maximize the use of the EOI. But it's perfectly fine if this project is included in the town's EOI. We would just note that you want to be specific in this when you describe the project, that the intent is for the water district to be the lead applicant. And that'll help us be able to provide guidance. Anything else, Pat, you would add?
No, I think that covers it. I just wanted to kind of use this opportunity to again flag that that this Friday will be the last day that a organization can submit 5.
Yeah, that's right.
5 projects. So that becomes, what Juan was saying, becomes even more important because after Friday, each organization can only submit 2 projects. So yeah, it'd be a good opportunity to discuss with the municipality in this case, and most likely it would be better for the water district to submit to allow the municipality to propose their two additional projects if they have them.
Great, thank you. So we have a lot of great questions in here. We will be reviewing all of these, and like I said, we'll be trying to aggregate. There's a lot of similar questions that we'll aggregate and put up in an FAQ. So if we could move to the next slide, I kind of just want to get us to the conclusion of our webinar today. We do want to make sure to let you know that the next webinar, which will be focused on the application itself, and specifically on the guidance for the applicants, that'll be held on Thursday, February 3rd at 10 a.m. And similarly, there is a link on our website. We invite you to register for the webinar right on the website. And then we do have, similar to what we did last year, we will have a technology webinar, which is to walk through the actual how to log into IGX, how to get to the login page, how to open up a full app, etc. And how to open up an expression of interest. And that we intend to have a recording of and to be posting on Tuesday, February 8th, right on the website. And so we've gotten a lot of questions about where to find more information. We invite you to visit www.mass.gov /one-stop. that will provide you with all the information on the one-stop, copy of the notice of funding availability, the NOFA, is there, which is a key element. We definitely encourage you to focus on reviewing that carefully. And there are also links to each of the grant programs that are part of the One Stop to provide you with that additional guidance, and so you can determine which category you would like to apply to. So that's going to be important as well. We also want to note that the MBTA community requirements and compliance is a key component this year as well. And the website that's posted here is where you can go to get additional information, including access to that form that we need to have filed by May 2nd. So we want to thank you for joining us today. We look forward to working with you and to reading. We do see it. There's been a lot of activity with the expressions of interest, and we thank you for those of you that have gotten your expression of interest in. The group is diligently reviewing those. And again, we encourage you to please look at the expression of interest, submit those early. I think that helps to maximize the time. Once you get your feedback, it gives you a lot of time to really be able to develop your full application. And we invite you to continue sending your questions. You could also send your questions directly to our email, which is onestop@mass.gov. That is being monitored daily, and we'd be able to also provide assistance that way. So thank you, everybody. That concludes our webinar 1 for the Community One Stop for Growth.